Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Starry Panel. I'm Starry, and I'm joined by a couple of my good friends on the podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh,
So, with the protests that have been going on and the entire Black Lives Matter movement happening in America recently, we figured that it would only be appropriate to kind of study more into this movement. And we recently watched a movie that was very relevant and timely to this situation about how African Americans have traditionally been oppressed indirectly or directly by the law. And this movie is named Just Mercy. And it features the actors Michael B. Jordan, Jamie Foxx, and Brie Larson as the main leads of the movie. So, I guess, how did you all feel about this movie in general?
I thought it was amazing. It was just incredible.
yeah. Um, it was seriously a tearjerker. There were like 3 times where I was on the verge of tears. It was intense, but it was really,
Definitely.
really good.
Yeah, I thought it was powerful and just necessary viewing, even just like not because of the current social situation, social climate, but just generally speaking, mandatory viewing.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
absolutely.
I agree.
Without I never knew about this case because this movie is actually based off of a real life story. So like this actually happened. And if it wasn't for this movie, I would have not looked into that, and watched like apparently there's a 60 minutes episode that featured the story in depth and we have the link to that video in the description and you can check that out if you're interested in learning more about the actual case. But overall, I feel like this movie really does that case justice. Like it was very accurate to what happened. So, there's a lot of characters to hate in this movie. Who's your least favorite character?
Suspenders, dude. I don't really remember the names very well, but
Yeah, I think his
the
name was
district
Tom.
attorney.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was awful.
Chapman?
Yeah.
Like, he throws you off at first with that like southern charm, but then you're like, oh, I hate this guy.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah,
just do.
absolutely.
It's really
I was like,
strange
oh, is this
how,
a good guy? No.
yeah, they all start off as seeming very nice and polite, but they really just are terrible people sometimes.
Right.
Exactly.
Even the sheriff that arrested Johnny D at the very beginning of the movie, he had a facade, like a very polite facade, in which just like a pleasant conversation. And then it was like, oh, then it's like the officers are pointing their guns.
Yep.
Yeah, and they all kind of hide behind this like reason why. Oh, we have to keep people safe. We have to. They all hide behind that.
Right.
And they kept trying to guilt trip. They kept trying to guilt trip Brian as well by saying that the family of the murdered girl were like really upset that they were trying to, bring like light to the situation. I'm sure that was on his mind quite a bit.
Well, the thing is, I actually feel, looking at the case as a whole, I think that the justice system actually failed. They were doing a disservice to not only Johnny D, of course, but to the family of the victim.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because they're just like, okay, well, here's the suspect, and we want him convicted, so we're going to like just say that he's the murderer and not even attempt to look for their actual killer. Which, if mind you, at the very end and in the real case, they never found the killer. Like he got away with it.
Yikes.
And that's because they just assumed it was Johnny D, even though it definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
It's painfully obvious
Yeah.
how innocent
Yeah.
it was.
Oh yeah, just imagine if they took the time and resources into trying to find the actual killer as opposed to just pinning it on him. They actually could have gone somewhere.
But I mean, like
Yeah.
he actually had an alibi. Like he was at that fish fry
Exactly.
event, so he had witnesses that could like verify
Yeah.
that he
Like
was
everyone corroborated it too.
right. Exactly. So apparently, I guess because like the witnesses don't count. I mean, it's really jarring to think that this happened and the actual case happened in 1986.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing too, because like I remember when I first saw like previews or whatever, I didn't know when it was. I just assumed it was going to be like the 50s or the
Mhm.
60s or something. And then like it was like 87, 88, and I was like, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really just horrible to realize how like recent all of this stuff has been.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So if like people in Alabama could get away with this, I'm pretty sure like this is not the only case, probably.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
Definitely not.
I can only imagine how many other people have been like how many other African Americans have wrongfully been wronged by the justice system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Ray. He was the one of the other people with Johnny D in the death rows,
Hmm.
and he said that he was convicted on the basis that like he could tell he was guilty just by looking at it, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
How do people get away with that?
Oh, that was
Exactly.
sad.
I mean, that's just like blatant racism at its
Yeah.
finest.
Hmm.
Like you can't really
Yeah,
argue. I mean,
racial
that's like
profiling.
judging every form of judgment as judgmental and being arbitrary. What do you guys think about the fact that in the movie, the jury they all voted for Johnny D to be sentenced to life imprisonment, but then like the district attorney were like, no, we're going to overrule that what the jury says, and we're just going to sentence him to death row.
It's just ridiculous. Like they're just trying to kill him because he's black. That's literally the only
Yeah.
reason. It's very obvious that he's innocent, and if
Mhm.
anybody just took the time to like think about it, they would have realized that. But maybe they did realize it and they were just ignoring it.
It's
And
just
another thing to kind of like take into account, I think, is this is like during 1986, 1980s and stuff. So you're talking about like how crazy all the politicians of the time were on crime, and so I think that totally fueled that, because during that period of time, like black people and black men in particular, they were like totally painted as criminals and rapists and stuff like that.
I mean, in some ways they still are.
Yeah.
Actually, in today, there are lots of instances where they are still painted like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's just continued on. That's the difference. That's just the difference between like the KKK stuff that happened at the beginning half of the 20th century versus now. It's just taken on a different form. Racism, I mean.
I think it's like taken to a more subtle degree. Like,
Yeah.
where like it's not so blatant where it's like, against the
Passive
law.
aggression, yeah.
Like, in this movie, this entire story basically is exactly about how like people can utilize the justice system in a way that's not illegal and still be able to oppress other people of different skin color in this case.
And it's just really ironic that they're using the justice system to like just put these unjust like actions to like make them validated almost.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I
the
mean,
fact
that's
that
what.
like a serial killer just got away with it because people couldn't like, focus on objective reality is just terrifying.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. I mean, when the system is literally designed to be that way, that's really unfortunate when this happens time and time again.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is about like Johnny D in this movie, I feel like he was targeted because he dared to have a relationship with a white woman, which is an example of an interracial relationship between black and white people. And I guess during those times, given the location, it was very frowned upon.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Do you see any of that kind of stigma these days?
Oh yeah, there's tons of people who have like family members that they brought home, someone who's a different race from them. Their family members would be not for it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's a barrier to human unity,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
How do y'all feel about Rolf Myers?
Um, that is a hard question because like obviously what he did was terrible, but like at the same time, the police definitely just completely manipulated him into doing what they wanted him to do. So like I don't know. I'm very mixed on him.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he was sitting in between a hard place because it was like when it's the good people, like so-called good authorities, at least that's the image that is expected. When they're offering you a deal, basically, you as a criminal, like when you take advantage of that.
Yeah. It's hard. Like, this is just the thing. He was taken advantage of as well, for sure.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely. Like putting him right next to the electric chair, knowing that he has a fear of being burned and like having his skin,
Hmm.
his flesh burned. Like, oh my gosh, that's just
Yeah.
like it's
Ooh,
terrible.
that's like phobia
Hmm.
manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Oh, yeah,
They're
totally.
just abusing his
Psychological.
PTSD.
Yeah.
Well, but even if we're conflicted on the fact that he did something bad, but he was manipulating doing so, I mean, I did like how the film kind of gave him that opportunity to redeem himself. Because especially like that's, I think it was the second time that Brian met with him in prison. Um, I think what really turned him around was when Brian was reminding him that Johnny D also has a family and kids just like
Hmm.
him, and just the focus on what's the same about them as
Hmm.
opposed to bearing in mind the differences. That's what caused him to turn around. I thought that was powerful, but then I also then even going off of that, like when he was testifying, that really subtle detail about how the cops basically how the officers, the people in the prison, um, woke him up at like 2 in the morning, several hours before the trial, so they wouldn't be as reliable.
Hmm.
That was
Hmm.
such a dirty move.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's I mean, I think you guys are absolutely right. I felt that he was one of the characters that actually had a trait of redemption in the film.
Yeah.
And it's just very ironic that a criminal actually ends up being like having more honor than the justice system
Yeah.
and having a
Yep.
heart.
Yeah. I liked that he redeemed himself that way. That was really cool.
What did you guys think about the subtle north and south dynamic that was witnessed in the movie? Because one of the things that I noticed when I was watching it was that, well, Brian Stevenson, the lawyer, was a graduate of Harvard, which is a school that's in, is it in Connecticut?
somewhere in the like that area. Yeah, New England.
Oh yeah.
Massachusetts, New England, I
I think
think. Yeah.
somewhere
That
like that.
still lingers today. I moved to the south from the north, and it's just still there. It's yeah.
But it's just interesting that we kind of see that dynamic because, like, early in the movie, Brian's mother was warning him that she didn't want him to go to Alabama because she was like, well, you're gonna get yourself killed down there.
Hmm.
And it seems like, being that they lived in the North, that they had more respect from society and they probably never have seen anything that was like the kind of injustices that happened later on in Alabama down in the
Well,
movie.
not yeah, not necessarily. I guess we're kind of seeing nowadays that that's not completely true because George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis and
Good point.
so forth. But yeah, definitely a more volatile environment down there. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best example is like when the two officers pulled over Brian and told him to get out of the vehicle immediately, and then pointed a gun in his head.
Oh, that scene.
Yeah, that.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, it's such a powerful
it made
scene.
me
I
so
was I was
mad.
pissed. I was pissed. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
same.
it really brings out so much emotion.
Yeah. It's appalling. Given all the things that's happening recently, it's obvious that these types of things still exist,
Hmm.
very much alive.
Definitely.
But just kind of one about that scene. One thing that I had in the back of my mind when I watched it was just the fact that Brian is a lawyer, and in society, being a lawyer is often an occupation that is very esteemed and has a lot of respect to it.
Hmm.
But you especially see in that case with the officers, with those officers, they didn't know, nor would they have probably cared. He's a black man, and that's really what they care about even if he wasn't doing anything wrong and just minding his own business. So it's just
Mhm.
kind of interesting that those titles that society has a respect for, that just goes out the window in that particular situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, another example of him just being treated with no respect whatsoever was when he was strip search, when he
Oh,
went
yeah,
into
that's
death
Yeah.
row initially. Like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh,
Oh, well, yeah.
Oh,
And then
that made me like so upset.
I was furious.
Yeah.
Right.
Same.
It's like they didn't even treat him like he was human.
Exactly.
Like you realize that the reason why they did a strip search was obviously out of intent to humiliate.
Yeah. Exactly.
oh yeah, when he told him to like bend and spread, and he said, "Just kidding," but just that you have the power, that you are doing that wrongfully, and then you're joking about it.
Just salt in the wound. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like it's bullying,
Mhm.
the ultimate level. And it's kind of like, funny enough, it kind of reminded me strangely of stop and frisk policies that happened in New York not too long ago.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
True.
And, coincidentally, most of the people who they were frisking were African Americans.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And what did you guys think about the prosecutor, Tommy Chapman?
Wanted to punch him in the face most of the
Yeah.
time.
First of all,
Until
like,
the end, when he made the right decision. Thank God. But oh my gosh.
well, I mean, like, I kind of felt like he was a racist too.
Yeah.
Because, like, in the beginning, like, he's a prosecutor, from what I understand. And when Brian goes to him for help, he basically just rejects him outright without even, like, seeing any of his work.
Yeah. He was just
Mhm.
hiding behind. This hurt this community very badly, and it's gonna be bad if you bring it back up. And it's like, okay, but if there's an actual murderer on the loose, we probably need to open it back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's
if they
disturbing.
actually took the time to actually investigate what happened, they probably could have found the real murderer. But they just pinned
Yeah.
it on Walter.
We looked it up, and actually, the real Johnny D, he passed away in 2013.
Yeah, I looked that up too after I watched it.
Right. So it's like I feel like most of the people who were involved in the case are probably like gone by now.
Mhm.
I mean, 1986 was kind of a long time ago. It was almost like 40 years. So,
Jeez, it's so long ago. Wow. I wasn't even alive then, but I'm used to people being like, "Oh yeah, the '80s was like 25 years ago." Nope, no longer. It's not 2003 anymore.
that was a good year. So, do you guys think that this case will ever be solved?
I don't
Probably
really
not.
think they could without the DNA evidence that was available at the time.
Yeah.
Right, which of course got probably squandered because of them focusing the entire case on somebody who didn't even do it. And also, one last character that I wanted to talk about in this movie was the sheriff, who was responsible for arresting Johnny D at the very beginning of the movie. So, did you know the real sheriff that character was based off of actually continued to serve on the police force for an additional 32 years after this whole incident?
Yeah, up until 2019, it's really just mind-boggling how someone who is that just corrupt could stay in power for that long.
Who was that
Yeah.
involved? You wouldn't think that anybody would question it?
I
No,
would
because
hope
he's the
so, but
sheriff. Like, um, outside of that, yeah, maybe, but he's the sheriff. Nobody's gonna like question him because that's just how the police department is.
Well, I think that kind of hints to why there's all these structural problems that we have and that we're currently seeing. Overall, like, I guess the last thing that we can talk about is the actual acting. So, how did you think, like, everyone did?
It was really good.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
Yeah.
I mean, like they had a very good cast, with Michael B. Jordan. I think this was like the first time that I've ever seen him act, actually. But I know he was in Creed, which was
Yeah,
a
he was also
different
in
kind of
Black
movie.
Panther.
Yep.
Yeah. So I feel like it's the role that he was playing in Creed was different from the role that he was playing here.
Yeah. I remember him when he was in Friday Night Lights when he was basically just a kid. He was just like a teenager. It's interesting. It was interesting to watch him kind of like shoot to stardom.
Yeah. But I really think that he did really, really, he kind of exceeded my expectations of him in this
Yeah.
Oh
movie.
yeah, he did amazing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Jamie Foxx was good as well. He played Johnny D basically to the T.
Yep.
And Tim Blake Nelson, who was the actor who played Ralph Myers in the movie, it's kind of funny because he actually had an uncanny resemblance to the real Ralph Myers.
Yeah.
So like they really like whoever was casting these people, I think they really nailed the casting.
I think with like Jamie Foxx, they did some like makeup and stuff.
Yeah, totally. So overall, like I mean, this is a movie that we definitely recommend seeing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
6 out of 5 stars.
For sure, and like you were saying earlier, Sir Sawitnik, this movie is very important regardless of the current context and outside of the context of the Black Lives Matter movement that's currently happening.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. We definitely recommend seeing this movie.
If you look it up on YouTube, you could actually rent this movie for free.
For the month of June. For the month of June.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, for the month of June only. So take advantage of this and actually watch this brilliant movie while it's free. And we'll post the link in the description box below so you can all just click on that and access the movie. And with that, thank you for joining our movie review and discussion of Just Mercy. And this is Starry signing off.
Bye.
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 So, due to the recent protests and the Black Lives Matter movements that have been happening across America, we decided to watch a very relevant movie. Okay, okay. I think the water faucet.
Sorry, I'll be quick. Okay.
I'm just like.
That's all right. That's what editing's for.
Maybe a blooper.
That would be so funny. You should totally do that. I would laugh.